Continuing coverage, tomorrow marks the 79th anniversary of the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. The horrific event pulled the United States into World War II and is a day that changed the lives of many. Local 6's Thomas Capps introduces us to a local retired journalist that's written a book on the Pearl Harbor attack from the perspective of Kentuckians.
Barry Craig spent decades telling stories and reporting the news, first at the Paducah Sun and then with the Associated Press. Now he's telling the stories of Kentuckians who were at Pearl Harbor on the fateful day it was attacked by the Japanese.
Of all the stories I wrote at the Paducah Sun, Democrat and Paducah Sun, this one is definitely a top 10. All these Pearl Harbor stories were.
Craig first began writing about Pearl Harbor veterans in 1976 when he told the story of Paducah native gunner's mate James Vessels.
I was just astonished at the clarity in which this man remembered.
Craig would go on to tell many stories of Pearl Harbor survivors throughout his career, a basis for his new book, Kentuckians in Pearl Harbor.
I wanted to do this from the perspective of Kentuckians, and I started with this group of about 12 or so that I interviewed with the Paducah Sun, Sun Democrat, and with the AP. And this is the idea to see what Kentuckians were doing.
Craig details every part of the historic event, including how people in Kentucky found out.
How did people learn about it? By radio. And you have to understand, in Kentucky in 1941, most farms didn't have radios. And so people would gather around car radios. If you happen to have a radio in your house, neighbors would come over. It was like a community thing.
To research his book, Craig traveled to Pearl Harbor. He says he felt a personal connection on that trip, especially since his dad served in World War II.
Oh, I'm telling you what, we wept at times out there. Because this is where my dad was. When he was an 18-year-old kid, all he wanted to do was play ball. And the war came along. Tom Brokaw called this the greatest generation. And it was. I mean, they saved the world. These were citizen soldiers. These weren't professionals. These guys were doing other things when the war started. And yet they won the war.
A book telling the stories of heroes that walked among us. Thomas Capps, WPST, Local 6.